in his 50 seconds who'd revived the theater's glory, and exactly 47 audience members vanished mid-show. The lights were on, the curtain up, programs scattered with Eternal Act printed in bold. No panic, no exits forced, just empty seats and echoing applause that witnesses outside swore lasted for minutes after. The city condemned the building, chained the doors, and let decay set in. But locals whisper that every April 5, the marquee flickers to life with phantom letters, and faint laughter or clapping leaks from the vents. Fast forward to the 5th of April 2025, a foggy spring night, with the current date marking another anniversary cycle. Our lead is Mira Kane, a sharp 27-year-old former theater critic turned true crime podcaster known for episodes debunking or confirming haunted venues. Mira's got a personal edge. She once wrote a scathing review that tanked a production, leading to its lead actor's despair. A mysterious ticket stub arrived in her mailbox. Thick cardstock, gold lettering, row A, seat 13, the Grand Majestic Midnight Show. She saw it as the ultimate episode and brought a crew. Theo, her reliable sound tech with pro mics, Lena, a theater historian digging up old programs, and Rafe, ex-security guy for muscle and skepticism. They pried open a rusted stage door at dusk, the fog thick outside, air inside heavy with dust, faded roses, and warm spotlights that hummed to life on their own. The auditorium was eerily pristine. 47 prime red velvet seats facing the stage, curtain twitching slightly as if breathing. At 11:47 p.m., Theo's sensitive mics captured thunderous applause, 47 pairs of hands clapping in perfect sync from nowhere. Lena's flashlight flickered out, and the old marquee outside lit up, visible through cracks. Tonight's performance. The audience. By 11:52 p.m., Rafe, testing the legend, sat in that cursed seat 13 for a laugh. The velvet arms coiled around him like living fabric, pulling him deeper. His hands rose involuntarily, clapping with unnatural force, his voice booming in 47 echoes. Encore! Bravo! He sank fully, the seat reforming plush and empty, but with a faint outline of his shape. At 11:55 p.m., Mira's notes on her script began bleeding fresh ink. Act. The critics arrive. The heavy curtain rose slowly on its own. Center stage bowed Victor Lang, skin glowing like overexposed film, eyes flaring like lens spots, makeup painted eternally perfect. Welcome to opening night, he announced, voice projecting without a mic. You've all been cast. Mira and Theo scrambled to the wings with Lena, but hallways twisted, props shifting like set pieces. By midnight, in a dusty prop room, they found Victor Lang's faded playbill tucked in a trunk. Brittle pages reading, "This isn't a building, it's the performance eternal." In 1923, during construction rush, 47 steelworkers were buried alive when the foundation trench collapsed, concrete poured over their screams to meet deadlines. Their essence soaked in, demanding endless encores. Every April 5, the show recruits. I tried to cancel the run in 1977. It gave me the lead role forever. At 12:17 a.m., Theo's headphones fused to his head, wires threading into his ears like veins. He began reciting lines from plays he'd never read, voice multiplying into layers. His body stiffened, folding into an antique standing microphone prop still broadcasting. Faint, endless applause from its grill. By 12:34 a.m., Mira was alone. Shadowy figures filled the seats below, clapping rhythmically. From the balcony echoed Lena's voice. Take your mark, critic time for your review. A spotlight pinned Mira, burning hot, forcing her on stage. At 12:47 a.m., the curtain fell with a whoosh. Mira bowed against her will, her body flattening into painted scenery backdrop, face visible in the canvas, eyes blinking slowly. The program on seats updated itself. Starring Mira Kane, Eternal Performance. Steelhaven grows quieter each year, the theater standing defiant. But every April 5, the marquee glows anew. And in 2025 cycle, just months ago, a fresh group of podcasters and historians found their own ticket stubs. The doors creaked open, the curtain rose, and from center stage, Mira's voice, poised and dramatic, called, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin." Let's pull back the curtain further, because the real chills come from the echoes that never fade. Mira Kane carried heavy guilt. Her brutal review years ago hadn't just closed a show. The devastated actor took his life shortly after, a fact she buried deep. That night, the phantom applause replayed excerpts from her review, whispered critiques judging her own life. Locals had avoided the Majestic for decades, claiming muffled laughter or lines from old plays drifted from the building on windy nights, or that spotlights swept empty streets. The velvet seats didn't just swallow Rafe. They whispered his unspoken regrets in fabric rustles. Theo's mic prop didn't go silent. It amplified distant screams from the foundation, layered under applause. Deeper history. Faded mill records confirm the 1923 tragedy. 47 immigrant workers lost in a foundation accident, rushed burial to avoid shutdowns, their tools and voices sealed in concrete. Earlier, trespassers met similar spotlights. 1,980 teens dared inside, emerging days later, reciting monologues endlessly. 2000s? Ghost hunters captured EVPs of personal critiques. No one spoke. The playbill wasn't ordinary paper. It felt warm, pages shifting like breathing. For those recent visitors, they don't just hear Mira, they feel the hot spotlight exposing hidden flaws, the curtain brushing like a final embrace. The Grand Majestic waits downtown, show in perpetual run, seats always available. If a gilded ticket stub appears with your name, or the marquee spells out a personal title under foggy lights, don't go. Burn it. Walk away. Because some theaters don't entertain audiences, they absorb them. Some roles are forever, and some encores never end. This one's strange, dark, and mysterious, from overture to final bow, the kind that ruins movies for a while. Stay safe out there, folks. And whatever you do, never accept a front row seat after dark. The ghostly workers of the old steel foundry. All right, folks, if you're the type who loves those strange, dark, and mysterious stories that creep under your skin and make every clank of metal or distant factory whistle send a shiver down your spine, then hold on tight. This one's going to burn like molten steel in your nightmares. We're diving into the decaying guts of an old Rust Belt town in Ohio, where the air still reeks of sulfur and sweat, and an abandoned foundry doesn't just rust away. It hungers for more hands on the line. This tale will have you questioning every abandoned industrial site you drive past, wondering if the echoes of hammers are really just the wind. So, crank up the heat, lock your doors, and let's forge ahead into the blistering horror of the ghostly workers of the old steel foundry. Deep in the forgotten corners of northeastern Ohio lies Iron Ridge, a once thriving steel town now crumbling under the weight of closed mills and empty lots. Think rusted chain-link fences sagging like defeated spines, weeds cracking through concrete, and the constant hum of distant trains carrying away what's left of the jobs. Looming over it all is Hale & Sons Foundry, a massive brick and iron monster from the late 1800s. Towering smokestacks like blackened fingers clawing at the sky, cavernous poor floors scarred by decades of molten hellfire, and a central crucible big enough to swallow a semi-truck. In its heyday, this beast employed hundreds, forging steel beams that built America's skyline, with workers enduring blistering heat that could melt flesh in seconds if you weren't careful. But on a sweltering night in May 1977, during a grueling midnight shift pushing for a production record, the foreman, Silas Kane, a grizzled veteran with burn scars like war medals, and all 47 workers on the floor disappeared. Alarms blared, but when rescuers arrived, the crucible was still bubbling with liquid steel, glowing orange at over 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. With no fuel lines connected, no power running, molds sat empty, tools scattered as if dropped mid-swing, and the air hung heavy with a metallic tang like fresh blood. No bodies, no screams reported, just gone, like the foundry had swallowed them whole. The city condemned the site, dynamited the offices to prevent trespassers, and tried to erase it from memory. But locals know better. Every May 19, the anniversary, those old stacks belch invisible smoke, sparks dance from empty vents, and a distant whistle calls like a siren's wail. Now, shift to the 19th of May 2025, a humid, oppressive night where the air clings like molten slag. Enter Rhea Holt, a tough 1-year-old welder who'd traded her torch for urban exploration videos after a shop accident left her scarred and seeking thrills in the ruins. Rhea's channel, Ghosts of Industry, blew up with footage from derelict factories, but this tip was different. An old pay stub slipped into her locker at her day job, yellowed paper with faded ink reading overtime shift midnight. Report to poor floor. No sender, just a faint burn mark on the edge. She rallied her crew, Dex, her drone pilot buddy with high-tech gear, Luz, a metallurgist friend analyzing industrial relics, and Bo, a grizzled ex-Foundry worker in his 60 seconds who'd quit Hale & Sons years before the incident, claiming it 8 men's souls. They cut through the sagging chain link at dusk, the fog rolling in thick from the nearby river, carrying a stench of coke ovens and something sharper like charred meat. Inside, the Foundry was a labyrinth of shadows. Rusted cranes dangling like nooses, slag pits yawning like graves, and 47 empty molds lined up on the poor floor, glowing faintly orange despite decades of cold. The air pulsed with unnatural heat, making sweat bead instantly. Rhea shrugged it off as residual heat from the earth. But Bo whispered warnings. Dex launched his drone for aerial shots. Luz scanned with a thermal gun. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the old steam whistle pierced the silence, 3 long blasts that rattled bones, echoing from nowhere. Dex's drone feed glitched, showing 47 shadowy figures in soot-stained coveralls, faces dripping like half-melted wax, hammering and pouring in silent rhythm. Luz's thermometer rocketed. 2,800 degrees from the crucible, no visible flame or fuel. By 11:52 p.m., Bo, drawn like a moth, touched one of the molds. His hand fused instantly, steel threads snaking up his arm like living veins. He howled, "It's calling roll! My name's up!" Skin sloughed off in steaming sheets, bones liquefying into glowing ingots as the mold pulled him in, reshaping him with wet crunches. At 11:55 p.m., Rhea's hard hat visor fogged with rust that dripped like blood, etching eternal shift, clock in now. A massive crane hook descended from the rafters, snagging Bo's reforming skeleton and dumping it into the bubbling crucible with a hiss of superheated agony. From the ladle's edge emerged Silas Kane, body forged from jagged slag, skin cracking like cooling metal, eyes blazing white-hot coals, voice a guttural furnace roar. "Back on the line, slackers." The poor waits for no man. Rhea and Dex bolted for the catwalks above, Luz scrambling behind. But stairs softened underfoot, dripping like taffy in the rising heat. Luz slipped first slag pit below, opening like a maw, her screams bubbling as she melted into the mix. By May 2012, 13 a.m., on a precarious walkway, they found Silas Kane's charred logbook chained to a beam. Pages brittle as ash, words singed in. Rhea read aloud, voice trembling. "This ain't a factory, it's endless labor, forged in blood." In 1890, during a brutal strike, 47 replacement scabs were locked in and buried alive when owners poured molten steel over the floor to end the dispute, their screams bound to the iron, demanding fresh crews forever. Every midnight shift calls. Every 47 years, it forges a new foreman to lead. I tried to sabotage it in 1977. It melted me into the core. At 12:17 a.m., Dex's drone hovered too close, warped in the heat, blades fusing to his hands like cybernetic graphs. He convulsed, pouring his own liquefied form into a nearby mold, solidifying into a grotesque statue, eyes still whirring like camera lenses, capturing his final frozen scream. By 12:34 a.m., Rhea stood alone. The molds below filled one by one, 47 ingots, cooling with embedded faces, twisting in silent torment, clanging her name in metallic rhythm. From the slag pit rose Luz's bubbling voice. "Clock in, Rhea. Your brother's waiting." Rhea's brother had died in a welding accident years ago. A secret pain she carried. Rhea's boots welded to the grating, steel rising up her legs like invasive roots, burning through flesh with excruciating slowness. At 12:47 a.m., the whistle blasted triumphantly. Rhea's body superheated from within, liquefying in waves of unimaginable pain, bones dissolving, skin vaporizing as she poured herself into the crucible. The furnace dimmed with a satisfied rumble. A new ingot pushed from a mold. RHEA Holt, Eternal Foreman, her face etched in agony, eyes glowing faintly. Iron Ridge has hollowed out further by late 2025, folks fleeing whispers of whistles in the wind, sparks igniting spontaneously in old homes. But every May 19, the stacks glow infernal. And just weeks ago, on the 19th of May 2025, a new team of explorers, drawn by anonymous pay stubs, cut the fence. The whistle screamed, and from the crucible's edge, Ria's roar echoed. "Punch in, slackers! The line's waiting!" Now, let's smelt even deeper into this blistering hell, because the true terror forges in the details that sear your soul. Ria Holt carried scars not just from welds. Her brother's fatal pour accident haunted her dreams, screams she replayed nightly. That night, the rising heat didn't just burn. It echoed his final cries, personalized, drawing her in like a magnetic pull. Locals had fled the stacks for years, claiming phantom hammers pounded at 3 a.m. or that rain sizzled on empty roofs like cooling metal. Wildlife avoided the site, birds dropping dead mid-flight from invisible fumes. The crucible's glow hummed forgotten Union hymns, words twisting into pleas for mercy. Dex's statue didn't freeze, still his lens eye zoomed erratically, replaying looped footage of melting flesh. Luz's slag voice bubbled not just words, but fermented regrets, her scientific curiosity turning to curdled screams. Digging back, obscure 1,890 labor records whisper of the strike massacre, 47 scabs lured in, doors barred, steel floodgates open to drown dissent, owners covering it as an industrial mishap. Previous intruders forged grim fates. 1,982nd squatters found fused to beams days later. 2000's filmmakers left cameras running. Footage showed them hammering their own limbs into molds. The logbook wasn't paper. It crisped like overfired slag, words reforming as you read, burning truths into your palms. For those recent explorers, they won't just hear Ria. They'll feel her infernal heat seeping into their boots, veins igniting from within, pulling them to the line. Hail and Sons waits in Iron Ridge's ruins, shift eternal, furnace insatiable. If a singed pay stub appears with your name, or you hear a distant whistle calling overtime under starless skies, ignore it. Run. Because some factories don't produce steel, they forge souls. This one's strange, dark, and mysterious to the core, the kind that makes every factory tour feel like a trap. Stay vigilant out there, folks. And whatever you do, never answer the call to overtime after dark. The Phantom Bell of the Deserted Schoolhouse. All right, folks, if you're here for those strange, dark, and mysterious stories delivered like they're happening to a friend over a campfire, then you've come to the right place. Today's tale is one that'll make you side-eye every school bell you hear ringing in the distance, especially if it's after hours or out in the middle of nowhere. This one comes from the sun-baked, wind-whipped deserts of New Mexico, where the landscape is all red rock mesas, endless sagebrush, and dust that gets into everything. It's about an old abandoned schoolhouse, where the bell never stops calling for class, and where some lessons come with a permanent detention. So, turn down the lights, make sure no one's lurking behind you, and let's get into the chilling story of the Phantom Bell of the Deserted Schoolhouse. Imagine a tiny, forgotten town called Dust Hollow, New Mexico, population barely scraping 200 these days, mostly ranchers and folks who like their privacy. Out on the edge of town, about a mile down a rutted dirt road that disappears into the sage, sits the Red Mesa Schoolhouse. It's a classic one-room adobe building from the early 1900s. Thick mud walls baked hard by the sun, a flat roof, small windows with wooden shutters, and a little bell tower on top. Back in its day, it served the scattered families in the area, kids from ranch hands, Navajo and Apache descendants, and settlers, all crammed into those 47 little wooden desks. But something catastrophic happened on the 5th of August, 1977, the unofficial first day of school season in that part of the state. A massive haboob, a wall of dust kicked up by sudden winds, rolled in off the desert like a biblical plague. Visibility dropped to zero, temperatures plummeted, and the sand blasted everything like a million tiny razors. That day, the teacher, Clara Voss, a dedicated 2-year-old woman who'd been teaching there for 15 years, and all 47 students simply vanished. Search parties combed the area for days. They found the schoolhouse door wide open, the blackboard scrawled with the words "Class in Session" in fresh chalk, and the bell still swinging gently. Even though the rope had been cut clean years earlier during a vandalism incident, no wind that day could have moved it, no footprints leading away. just gone. The county investigated, called it a tragic accident, maybe the storm disoriented everyone and they wandered off, but no bodies were ever found. They boarded up the windows, padlocked the door, and condemned the place. Locals, though, they knew better. Every August 5 since then, no matter the weather, that bell tolls at night. Deep, resonant rings that carry for miles across the empty desert, and people who get too close swear they hear children's voices chanting lessons on the wind. Fast forward to the 5th of August 2024, exactly 47 years later, our main character is Tessa Ruiz, a 27-year-old history teacher from Albuquerque. Tessa's got that young, enthusiastic vibe. She runs a popular YouTube channel doing back-to-school vlogs, exploring old schools, sharing fun history facts, and occasionally debunking urban legends. She'd heard about Red Mesa online, Reddit threads, TikToks, local podcasts, calling it one of New Mexico's most haunted spots. Tessa figured it was perfect content. Let's prove it's just wind and echoes. She assembled a small crew: Diego, her 9-year-old cameraman and best friend since college; Maya, a 5-year-old researcher who digs up old records like a pro; and Lupe, a local guide in her 50 seconds from Dust Hollow, who knew the back roads and reluctantly agreed to show them the way, though she warned them repeatedly not to go and see. They arrived at dusk, the sun dipping behind the mesas in a blood-orange glow, kicking up little dust devils across the plains. The schoolhouse looked exactly like the old photos. Weathered adobe crumbling at the edges, tumbleweeds piled against the walls, and that bell tower looming silently. They pried off the rotten boards over the door, easy enough after decades of neglect, and stepped inside. The air hit them like a wall, thick with the smell of dry chalk, old paper, and desert sage. But here's what stopped them cold. The classroom was pristine. Not trashed like you'd expect from an abandoned building. 47 small wooden desks in perfect rows, each with a name carved into the top from decades ago. Pencils sharpened and lined up. Books open to the same page. The big blackboard at the front wiped clean except for faint smudges. It looked like class had just let out for recess 47 years ago. Tessa laughed it off at first. Okay, this is creepy, but probably some pranksters keeping it up for the legend. Diego set up his camera on a tripod, lights flooding the room. Maya started photographing details. Lupe hung back by the door, muttering prayers in Spanish. Then, at exactly 11:47 p.m., the bell tolled. One single, deep ring that vibrated through the floorboards, into their teeth, into their bones, no wind outside, no one near the rope, which was still missing anyway. The desks started scraping across the floor on their own, chairs swiveling to face the group. Diego's camera feed glitched hard, static, then suddenly showing the room filled with children. Translucent figures in old-fashioned clothes, sitting quietly at the desks, eyes solid white like chalk dust, staring straight at the lens. By 11:52 p.m., Lupe dropped her flashlight in panic. It rolled straight across the floor, uphill, against gravity, and stopped under the teacher's desk. That's when they saw her. Clara Voss, or what was left of her. Skin like cracked dust, hair a tangle of dried tumbleweed, holding a ruler that looked suspiciously like polished bone. She sat up slowly, smiling with lips that didn't quite move right. "You're late for class," she whispered, voice dry as wind over sand. At 11:55 p.m., Maya's notebook flipped open on its own. Words appeared in red chalk dust. "Recess is over." The boarded windows sealed tighter from the inside, nails driving themselves back in. Then, sand started pouring from cracks in the ceiling, forming 47 perfect little mounds on the floor like tiny graves. Lupe screamed as her shadow peeled away from her feet, walking independently to one of the desks and sitting down. Her body went limp, collapsing empty like a deflated balloon. Tessa and Diego bolted for the cloakroom at the back, a small storage area to regroup. But the door slammed shut, sealing with lines of chalk and what looked like finger bones. On a shelf, they found Clara Voss's old ledger, pages brittle but readable. Tessa read aloud, voice shaking. "The bell isn't metal, it's memory." Forged in 1880, when the first school was built on this site, 47 Apache children from a nearby village were buried alive here during a land dispute, bell rung nonstop to drown out their screams. The sound bound them. Every 47 years, it calls a new teacher to continue the lesson. I tried to dismiss class permanently in 1977. It wouldn't let me. By 12:17 a.m., Diego started changing. His eyes clouded over with white dust, chalk pouring from his mouth like he was coughing up eraser shavings. He stumbled to the wall, fingers scraping as his skin cracked open, revealing black slate underneath. He wrote in huge letters, "Detention forever." Then he sat at a child's desk, picking up a pencil that moved on its own. "I will not leave. I will not leave." At 12:34 a.m., Tessa was alone. The bell tolled 47 times, each ring a layered child's scream. The translucent students stood in unison, chanting in eerie harmony. "Ring the bell, Teacher Tessa. Ring the bell." A new rope grew from the floor in front of her, thick bronze veins pulsing like arteries. Against her will, her hand reached out, gripped it, and pulled. The final ring wasn't a bell sound. It was pure screams, 47 young voices echoing forever. Tessa's body folded unnaturally into the teacher's chair, her skin hardening into adobe clay, eyes turning to chalk white. Come 2025, Dust Hollow is quieter than ever, folks moving away, saying the desert is reclaiming the town, but every August 5, the bell tolls. And on the 5th of August 2025, at 11:47 p.m., a new group of vloggers pulls up in their Jeep cameras, ready to debunk the myth. The door creaks open on its own. The blackboard scratches fresh words, "Welcome to class." And from the teacher's desk, Tessa's voice, calm, authoritative, calls out, "Take your seats, children. We have so much to learn." Now, let's dive even deeper, because the real dread is in the details that stick with you long after. Tessa Ruiz wasn't just some random content creator. Years earlier, as a student teacher, she'd failed a troubled kid on a critical assignment. He spiraled, dropped out, and later took his own life. Tessa carried that guilt like a weight. That night, as the bell remembered everything, the children's ghostly hands wrote her old gradebook entries on the walls in blood-red chalk, highlighting every F she'd ever given. Locals had always avoided Red Mesa. They claimed pencils left outside would roll uphill toward the schoolhouse at night. Compasses spun wildly. Ranchers lost livestock that wandered too close, found later as piles of clean bones arranged like desks. Lupe's shadow didn't just detach. As it sat, it pulled memories from her, grading her life's mistakes and dripping red ink across the floor. Diego's transformation wasn't quick. His skin erased parts of him layer by layer, like a chalkboard being wiped clean of his identity. The sand graves? They weren't random. Each mound had a tiny nameplate matching the carved desks. And for those new vloggers in 2025, they don't just hear Tessa's voice, they feel the sharp rap of her bone ruler on their knuckles, even through the camera feed. To understand the true origin, you have to go back to 1880. Historical records that Maya had dug up before things went south confirm a dark incident. During tensions over land, a group of Apache children sheltering in a temporary school structure were buried in a collapsed wall, accident or worse, and the settlers rang the new bell for hours to cover the cries while handling the situation. The bell was cast from bronze mixed with something unspeakable, binding the trauma into its very metal. Previous visitors met grim ends too. In the 1,980 seconds, a group of teens partied there, only one stumbled out babbling about eternal homework. In the 2000s, paranormal investigators left equipment running overnight. The audio captured lessons in a language no one recognized, ending with modern names being called for roll. The phantom bell of Red Mesa waits patiently, class in perpetual session. If you're ever driving through the New Mexico desert on the first day of school season and hear a deep toll carried on the wind or children reciting multiplication tables from nowhere, don't stop. Don't investigate. Floor it and get out of there. Because some schools never close, some teachers never retire, and some students never graduate. This one's strange, dark, and mysterious in the worst way. The kind that makes you wonder what's really echoing in those empty buildings we drive past. If it gave you the chills, you know what to do. Stay safe out there, folks. And whatever you do, don't answer the bell. The screams from the old lighthouse on Cliff's Edge. All right, folks, if you're a fan of strange, dark, and mysterious stories told in the format of a true story, then buckle up, because this one is going to hit you like a rogue wave in the dead of night. You know me. I'm all about those tales that make you question what's real and what's lurking just beyond the fog. And trust me, This story from the rugged coast of Maine is one that'll have you second-guessing every lighthouse beam you see slicing through the darkness. It's got screams that echo from the depths, a light that refuses to die, and a curse that's claimed more souls than you can count. So, grab a hot cup of coffee, lock your doors, and let's dive into the chilling tale of the screams from the old lighthouse on Cliff's Edge. Picture this. It's a cold, blustery evening in November 2024 in a small, forgotten town called Stormhaven, tucked away on the jagged coastline of Maine. Now, if you've never been to Maine, let me paint the scene for you. This is the kind of place where the Atlantic Ocean meets sheer cliffs, like old enemies clashing in battle. The wind howls like a banshee, the waves crash with the force of 1,000 hammers, and the fog rolls in so thick you could cut it with a knife. Stormhaven isn't your typical tourist spot. It's a fishing village where folks have lived off the sea for generations, battling nor'easters that can turn the sky black and the water into a churning monster. And right on the edge of town, perched precariously on a 200-foot cliff that drops straight down into the icy abyss, stands Cliff's Edge Lighthouse. This lighthouse isn't just any old beacon. Built back in 1904 from solid granite blocks hauled up by hand, it was meant to guide ships through treacherous waters dotted with hidden rocks and deadly currents. For decades, it did its job faithfully, its powerful lamp sweeping the horizon every few seconds, warning sailors to steer clear. But in 1977, something went horribly wrong. It was during one of the worst storm surges in Maine history. A massive wall of water driven by hurricane-force winds that slammed into the coast like a freight train. The keeper at the time was a man named Elias Thorne, a grizzled veteran of the sea who'd manned that tower for over 30 years. Elias was known around town as a no-nonsense guy, always chain-smoking his pipe and staring out at the ocean like he could see secrets in the waves. That fateful night, Elias was up in the lamp room, tending to the light as the storm raged. Meanwhile, out at sea, a fleet of 47 fishermen, local guys from Stormhaven, fathers and sons trying to haul in one last catch before the weather turned deadly, got caught in the surge. Their boats were tossed like toys, radios crackling with desperate maydays. The Coast Guard later pieced together what happened from the wreckage. The fishermen radioed for help, saying the lighthouse beam was acting strange, pulsing red instead of its usual white, and seeming to, well, call to them. Elias Thorne responded on the radio, his voice calm but urgent. "Steer clear, boys. The light's got a mind of its own tonight." But then, silence. The next morning, when rescuers finally made it to the lighthouse, Elias was gone, vanished without a trace. And those 47 fishermen? Their boats washed up empty, life jackets still strapped in place, as if they'd just stepped off into the water. The weirdest part? The lighthouse lamp was still spinning, its beam cutting through the lingering fog like nothing had happened. But here's the kicker. The power had been knocked out for miles around. No electricity, no generator running, yet that light burned bright. The Coast Guard investigated, chalked it up to some freak electrical anomaly, and decommissioned the place. They sealed the doors, boarded up the windows, and left it to rot. But the locals knew better. They whispered that on stormy nights, the light would flicker back to life on its own, sweeping the sea with that eerie red glow. And with it came the screams, faint at first, like echoes from a dream, but growing louder, more desperate, as if the ocean itself was crying out in pain. Fast forward to the 7th of November 2024, exactly 47 years after that tragic night. Enter our main character, Mara Quinn. Mara was a 3-4-year-old marine biologist from Boston, sharp as a tack and tough as nails. She dedicated her life to studying the mysteries of the deep, particularly bioluminescent plankton, those tiny ocean critters that glow in the dark like underwater fireflies. Mara wasn't in Stormhaven for the ghost stories. She was there on a legitimate research trip. Reports had been coming in from local fishermen about strange glowing tides near Cliff's Edge, red luminescence in the water that didn't match any known plankton species. Mara figured it could be a breakthrough, maybe a new discovery that could explain some of the ocean's weirder phenomena. She assembled a small team. Finn Harlow, a burly diver in his late 22nd with a knack for underwater photography, Lila Voss, a 9-year-old acoustic technician who specialized in recording ocean sounds with high-tech hydrophones, and Captain Beck Ramirez, a seasoned sailor in his 52nds who'd navigated these waters for decades. They set out on their research vessel, the Siren, a sturdy 40-foot boat equipped with all the bells and whistles, sonar, sampling gear, and enough lights to turn night into day. They anchored about 500 yards offshore from the cliff, right where the glowing tides had been spotted. The nor'easter was building that night, winds whipping up to 60 miles per hour, waves cresting at 15 feet. Mara and her team were bundled in their foul-weather gear, excitement buzzing in the air despite the storm. "This could be big," Mara said, peering through the rain-streaked windows. "If we can sample that glow, it might rewrite the books on bioluminescence." As the clock ticked toward midnight, things started off normal enough. Lila dropped her hydrophone, a sensitive underwater microphone, over the side, listening for any unusual sounds that might correlate with the glowing water. Finn prepped his dive suit, just in case they needed to go under. Beck kept the engines idling, ready to pull anchor if the storm got too dicey. And Mara? She was up on deck with her binoculars, scanning the horizon. That's when the lighthouse beam swept over them for the first time. It wasn't the cold, mechanical white light you'd expect from an old, abandoned tower. No, this was a deep, pulsing red, warm like blood under your skin. It lingered on the siren longer than it should have, making the glass windows heat up and the metal hull groan like it was alive. At 11:47 p.m., Lila's hydrophone picked up something that made everyone's blood run cold. At first, it was just static, the usual roar of waves and wind. But then, cutting through it all, came the screams. Not animal cries or wind howls, these were human voices, layered and overlapping, like a chorus from hell. Lila counted them later from the recordings. Exactly 47 distinct screams, wailing in agony, circling the boat from below. "What the hell is that?" Finn muttered, his face pale under the deck lights. Mara grabbed the headphones, listening intently. The screams weren't just noise, they formed words, faint but unmistakable. "Come home! Come home!" Panic started to set in. The lighthouse beam locked onto the siren, intensifying until the air shimmered with heat. Finn's flashlight flickered and died in his hand, even though the batteries were fresh. Below the boat, the water began to glow that same sinister red, bubbling like it was boiling from the inside. Beck revved the engines, yelling, "We're getting out of here!" But before he could throw the throttle, the door to the lighthouse, way up on the cliff 200 feet above them with no visible stairs or path, creaked open on its own. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the red light. It was dressed in an old keeper's coat, the kind from a century ago, with a wide-brimmed hat casting shadows over its face. Mara raised her binoculars, zooming in. What she saw made her drop them in horror. The figure was Elias Thorne, or at least what was left of him. His face looked melted, like wax left too close to a flame, with eyes that weren't human anymore, but glassy lenses reflecting the beam. His mouth stretched wide, unnaturally so, like the bell of a foghorn. He raised one arm, pointing directly at the siren, and the beam surged brighter. That's when the engine exploded in a shower of sparks and flames. The boat lurched, taking on water fast. Chaos erupted. At 11:55 p.m., as they scrambled for life jackets, Beck was yanked overboard. It wasn't a wave that got him. It was hands. Hands made of water, fingers curling like foam, grabbing his ankles and pulling him under. His scream pierced the night, sharp and terrified, before it cut off abruptly. But it didn't end there. On Lila's hydrophone, his voice joined the chorus, echoing back, "Come home, come home." Now there were 48 screams. Mara, Finn, and Lila had no choice. The siren was sinking, flames licking the deck. They jumped into the freezing water, swimming desperately toward the cliff base. The waves battered them, but somehow they made it to the rocks. Gasping and shivering, they looked up, and there it was, a staircase spiraling up the sheer cliff face. It hadn't been there before. Locals swore the cliff was unclimbable. But now, steps carved from what looked like bleached bone gleamed in the red light, twisting upward like a spine. "We have to climb," Mara said through chattering teeth. "It's our only shot." They started up, the stairs slick and cold under their hands. Each step seemed to pulse faintly, like a heartbeat, and the air grew warmer the higher they went, carrying a stench of salt mixed with something metallic. Blood. At the top, the lighthouse door stood wide open, inviting them in. Inside, the tower wasn't what they expected. Instead of stairs leading up to the lamp room, a spiral staircase descended downward, burrowing into the cliff itself. The walls dripped with condensation, and faint screams echoed from below. By 12:17 a.m., they'd reached the bottom. What they found defied logic. An upside-down lamp room buried deep in a cavern filled with seawater. The massive lens, the heart of the lighthouse, shot its beam downward into the depths, illuminating a horrifying sight. Floating in the water were 47 bodies, perfectly preserved as if time had frozen them. Fishermen in oilskins, their eyes wide open, mouths twisted in silent screams. And standing on the lens itself, fused to it like he'd grown from the glass, was Elias Thorne. He spun slowly with the beam, his melted face grinning. "The light needs eyes," he whispered, his voice carrying over the water like a foghorn. "The sea needs voices." Finn was the first to crack. His eyes clouded over, turning milky white, and salt water began pouring from his ears like tears. He stepped forward into the beam, his skin bubbling and dissolving, bones glowing from within as he melted into light. Shadows danced on the cavern walls, not random patterns, but silhouettes of sinking ships, masts breaking, men overboard. Lila screamed, clutching her hydrophone, but the device melted in her grip, its wires snaking up her arm, burrowing into her veins like living things. She opened her mouth, and out came not her voice, but 47 others, singing a twisted lullaby, the same one her mother had sung to her as a child, now distorted and drowned. Mara was alone now, at 12:47 a.m. The bone stairs behind her crumbled, collapsing into dust, and she fell, plunging into the cavern's water. It wasn't cold like the ocean. It was warm, almost welcoming, and full of eyes. Thousands of tiny, glowing eyes staring back at her. Elias extended a hand from the lens, his fingers elongated like tentacles. "Join the beacon?" he said. "Guide them home." Mara's lungs burned as she gasped for air, but instead of water, light filled them, red, pulsing, eternal. That was the end for Mara and her team. But the story doesn't stop there. By 2025, Stormhaven had become a ghost town. Folks packed up and left, whispering about the red light that still burns every storm, sweeping the sea like a predator's gaze. On November 7th of that year, exactly 1 year later, a new group of researchers anchored offshore, drawn by the same glowing tides. At 11:47 p.m., the beam swept over their boat, and from the water below, a new voice joined the screams. Mara's, clear as day, calling out, "Come home! Come home!" Now, let's dive a little deeper into this nightmare, because like all good, strange, dark, and mysterious tales, the details are what make your skin crawl. Mara Quinn wasn't just any marine biologist. She'd grown up in a coastal town not far from Stormhaven, and her father, a fisherman himself, had been lost to a riptide when she was just a kid. His last words, radioed back to shore, were, "The light's calling me home." Mara had dismissed it as delirium, but that night on the Siren, when the beam warmed the glass, she swore she heard her father's voice in the screams. It wasn't just sound vibrating through the air. It was in her bones, shaking her from the inside out like the ocean was whispering secrets only she could hear. Locals in Stormhaven had avoided Cliff's Edge for years. Compasses spun wildly near the tower, pointing not north, but straight down into the cliff. Fishermen reported their nets coming up empty except for bones, human bones, polished smooth by the currents. And those bone stairs? They didn't just appear out of nowhere. Witnesses from afar claimed they grew, vertebrae by vertebrae, clicking into place like a skeleton assembling itself. When Finn stepped into the beam, his dissolving skin didn't just glow, it cast shadows that replayed the 1977 storm surge frame by frame like a ghostly movie projected on the cavern walls. Lila's hydrophone didn't melt randomly. As the wires burrowed into her, they played not just screams, but her own childhood lullaby, "Rock-a-bye, baby," on the treetop, twisted into something monstrous, with waves crashing in the background. The cavern water wasn't mere liquid. It watched you, eyes blinking in the glow, following your every move. And for those new researchers in 2025, they didn't just hear Mara's voice, they felt her breath in the fog, cold and insistent, wrapping around their necks like invisible hands. The light at Cliff's Edge waits patiently, its beam eternal, unblinking. If you're ever out on the Maine coast and hear a foghorn that sounds too much like a scream, or see a red glow cutting through the mist, turn back. Swim away. Run if you have to. Because some keepers never die, they just evolve, becoming part of the beacon itself. And some lighthouses aren't there to save ships, they're there to sink them, one soul at a time. This story, folks, is a reminder that the sea holds more mysteries than we can ever uncover. It's strange, it's dark, and it's mysterious as hell. If it gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe for more tales like this, and remember, always respect the ocean, because sometimes the truth out there is scarier than any fiction. Stay safe out there. Word count, approximately 2,500. Character count, 14,200. Wait, hold on, I need to expand more to hit 20,000 characters. Let's add deeper backstory and more atmospheric details. To really understand the dread of Cliff's Edge, we have to go back even further. The lighthouse wasn't built on virgin land. In the late 1800s, before the tower went up, that cliff was a sacred site for the local Passamaquoddy tribe. They called it the Mouth of the Deep, a place where the veil between the living world and the spirit realm was thin. Legends spoke of a sea spirit, a guardian of lost souls, that demanded tributes from those who dared the waters. Fishermen would leave offerings, carved bones, shells, even drops of blood, to appease it. But when the government built the lighthouse in 1904, they dynamited the sacred rocks, disturbing whatever slumbered below. Elias Thorne, the first keeper after the incident, wrote in his log about strange occurrences from day one. Whispers in the wind, shadows moving against the light, and dreams of drowning men calling his name. By the 1,970 seconds, Elias had become obsessed. His journals, recovered by the Coast Guard, detailed visions of the 47 fishermen not as victims, but as volunteers for the light. He believed the beam wasn't just a warning, it was a summons, pulling souls to feed the sea spirit. On that storm night in 1977, Elias didn't vanish. He merged with the tower. Witnesses from nearby boats claimed they saw the beam bend, wrapping around the fishermen's vessels like tentacles, dragging them under while Elias's silhouette grew larger, absorbing the light. Mara's team wasn't the first to investigate post-1977. In the 1,980 seconds, a paranormal group tried, but their tapes captured only static and screams. One member jumped from the cliff, muttering about eyes in the water. In the 1,990 seconds, a developer wanted to turn it into a tourist attraction. His crew found bone fragments embedded in the granite, forming patterns like runes. They quit after tools started moving on their own. When Mara arrived, she brought scientific skepticism, but the ocean had other plans. The glowing tides? Not plankton. Analysis from her samples before everything went south showed traces of human DNA mixed with luminescent compounds unknown to science, as if the sea was bleeding light from the dead. The hydrophone recordings? Experts who listened later reported nightmares for weeks, hearing their own loved ones' voices woven in. Finn's backstory adds another layer. He was a former Navy SEAL, haunted by a dive gone wrong where he lost his partner to a cave collapse. That night, as his skin dissolved, the shadows on the wall showed not just old ships, but his partner's face, beckoning him deeper. Lila, an orphan raised by the sea, felt the wires as a twisted homecoming, her lullaby, a siren song pulling her back. And Mara? Her fall into the cavern was no accident. As the light filled her lungs, she saw visions. Her father, Elias, the 47, all part of a chain guiding the lost. Now, in 2025, Stormhaven's abandonment is total. Houses stand empty, boats rot in harbors, and the cliff erodes faster than natural, as if the sea is claiming more land. If you visit Maine, avoid Stormhaven. The light still burns, the screams still call. Strange, dark, mysterious, and all too real. The endless night at the shuttered amusement park. The last ticket stub for Lakeside Fun Park was sold on the 12th of September 1987. By September 13, the gates were chained, the carousel horses draped in canvas, and the marquee lights shot out by bored teenagers with 22 seconds. The place sat on the north shore of Lake Hopatcong, New Jersey, 43 acres of rust and regret. Everyone said it was the insurance rates that killed it. Everyone was wrong. 23 years later, on a Friday the 13th in August 2010, Four college sophomores from Rutgers decided the abandoned park would make the perfect backdrop for their urban exploration YouTube channel. They called themselves Graveshift Crew. Jake J.T. Torres, the charismatic host, GoPro strapped to his chest like body armor. Maya Patel, sound tech, always recording, always listening. Derek Train O'Connell, the muscle, ex-lineman who could shoulder any fence. Lena Kim, the researcher, armed with a binder of clippings and a flashlight that doubled as a taser. They parked Jake's beat-up Civic on a dirt service road at 11:47 p.m. The moon was a clipped fingernail behind the clouds. No wind, just the low hum of cicadas and the smell of lake rot. The chain-link fence had a man-sized flap cut years ago. Someone had even taped a faded smiley face sticker to the jagged edge. Derek peeled it back. Maya's recorder caught the metallic shh of the links. Jake narrated in a whisper, "Gates open, folks. Looks like we're not the first ones to RSVP to this party." Lena clicked her headlamp to red mode, less visible from the road. "Security hasn't patrolled since '04, she said. "But the powers still live in the maintenance tunnels. Watch for tripwires." They slipped through. The midway stretched ahead like a black and white photograph left in the sun. Cotton candy stands sagged under kudzu. The Tilt-A Whirl cars hung at impossible angles, seats filled with decades of rainwater and mosquito larvae. A single bumper car sat in the center of the track, its pole bent like a broken finger pointing at the sky. Jake's GoPro light swept the Ferris wheel. Every gondola was empty except the very top one. Something pale, fluttered inside paper, maybe. Or cloth. Maya's headphones crackled. She lifted one side. Getting a tone. 432 hertz. That's A, below middle C. Perfect pitch. Derek snorted. Ghosts tuning their instruments? Lena ignored him and opened her binder. Funhouse used to play calliope music in a 432. Supposedly makes people dizzy faster. Jake grinned at the lens. "Let's go say hi to Mr. Calliope." The funhouse entrance was a gaping clown mouth, paint flaked to reveal rotting plywood teeth. The tongue, once a red carpet, had rotted into black slime. They stepped over it. Inside, the air was 20 degrees colder and smelled of ozone and burnt sugar. Mirrors lined the first corridor. Some were cracked, others were missing entirely, leaving rectangular wounds in the wall. Jake's reflection lagged half a second behind him. He stopped. "Guys, did you see that?" Maya's recorder hissed. The 432 tone was louder now, layered under a child's laugh high, looped, wrong. They pressed on. The next room was the Hall of Barrels' giant rotating cylinders you were supposed to run through. These barrels hadn't spun in decades, but one was moving, slowly. Creak, 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 like a heartbeat. Derek stepped forward. "I got this." He planted a boot on the barrel. It stopped, then reversed. Faster. His foot slipped. He windmilled, caught the edge, and the barrel spat him out the other side into darkness. Silence. "D-Train," Jake called. A low groan answered. Then Derek's voice muffled. "I'm good. But you gotta see this." They found him in the mirror maze. Hundreds of Dereks stared back, some bleeding from the mouth, some with no eyes, some waving when the real Derek stood still. Maya's recorder overloaded. The 432 tone became a scream of static. Lena traced a finger along a mirror. "These aren't reflections. Look, scratches on the glass match the ones on the inside." Jake's GoPro battery read 3%. He smacked it. "We're live streaming to 400 people. Don't quit on me now." A new sound layered under the static, the clack, clack, clack of a roller coaster ascent chain. But the coaster, the Screaming Eagle, had been dismantled in '89. The track was scrap, yet the sound grew closer. They ran. The exit dumped them onto the midway again, but it wasn't the same midway. The sky was wrong, too many stars, arranged in perfect spirals. The bumper car was gone. In its place, a child's red tricycle, spinning slow circles, bell ding-ding-dinging, though no one touched it. Lena flipped frantically through her binder. Time dilation reported in '83. Two kids entered the funhouse at 8 p.m., exited at 8:05, but their watches said 3 a.m. Parents thought they were lying. Maya's voice cracked. "Guys, my phone says 11:52 p.m. We've been inside 40 minutes. Jake checked his GoPro timestamp. 3 hours, 14 minutes, and 7 seconds. The battery died. Darkness swallowed them. Emergency lights flickered on, blood red, strobing every 3 seconds. In the flashes, they saw the Ferris wheel turning backward, gondolas filling with shadow children who waved, the tilt-A whirl spinning so fast the cars blurred into a silver ring. The clown mouth of the funhouse chewing wooden teeth, gnashing, tongue carpet writhing like a dying snake. Derek grabbed Maya's arm. "We go back through the funhouse. It's the only way we came." They sprinted. The tricycle followed, bell dinging faster, wheels leaving no tracks in the dust. Inside the funhouse, the mirrors showed them older gray hair, missing teeth, eyes sunken. One mirror showed Jake alone, screaming, mouth sewn shut with ride tickets. The barrels spun in opposite directions now, a vortex. Derek tried to jump. The barrel caught him, lifted him off the ground, and folded him like laundry. His scream cut off with a wet crunch. Maya retched. Lena dragged her forward. "Don't look! Just run!" They burst into the final room. The blow-up palace, once filled with inflatable slides. Now it was a single black balloon the size of a house, pulsing, a seam split open like a mouth. Inside, the missing bumper car. Headlights on, engine idling. The car's door opened by itself. A child's voice, not from speakers, but from inside their skulls. "Trade you. One ride for one night. Forever." Maya's recorder exploded in her hand, plastic shrapnel embedding in her palm. Blood dripped onto the floor and spelled in perfect cursive, "Mine." Lena tackled Maya away from the car. They scrambled backward. The balloon deflated with a sound like a dying whale collapsing into the bumper car. Metal screamed. The car imploded, folding inward until it was the size of a child's toy. Then it rolled, tires squealing on nothing, straight at them. They dove through a side exit that hadn't been there before. They were outside again. Dawn. Real dawn. Orange sunlight on the lake, gulls crying. The park looked exactly as it had when they arrived. Rusted, silent, abandoned. Except for one thing. On the midway, in a perfect circle of undisturbed dust, sat Derek's Rutgers hoodie, folded. The GoPro was clipped to the collar, lens cracked but still recording. The timestamp read 11:59 p.m., the 13th of August 2010. They never found Derek, or the funhouse, or the exit they used. The YouTube channel uploaded one final video at 3:33 a.m. that night. Title, "We Traded." It's 47 seconds long. 00:10. Jake's face, pale, whispering. If you're watching this, don't. 0:11:30, static. But if you isolate the waveform, you hear the 432 tone and children counting backward from 100. 0:31, 0:47. The camera pans to the Ferris wheel. Every gondola is full. Every child waves in perfect sync. At 0:47, the screen cuts to black. The last frame, if you brighten it 400%, shows Maya and Lena in the front gondola, mouths open in silent screams, eyes replaced by ride tickets. The video ends with text. Next ride starts at sunset. Bring friends. Lakeside Fun Park is still chained shut. The fence flap is gone, welded over. But every August 13, the local PD gets calls. Laughter from inside, lights on the Ferris wheel, the clack, clack, clack of a coaster that isn't there. If you go after dark, bring a watch. If it stops at 11:52 p.m., run, because the park doesn't close at midnight anymore. It opens, and the Endless Night is always looking for new riders. The Shadows That Dance in the Pinewood Library. All right, folks, if you're tuned in for those strange, dark, and mysterious stories told, like I'm sitting across from you with a flashlight under my chin, then you're in for a treat. Or maybe a nightmare. This one will make you think twice before lingering in any library after the lights start to dim, especially ones surrounded by whispering pines on a crisp fall night. We're heading to the rolling green hills of Vermont, where the air smells like evergreen and old secrets. It's about a gorgeous old library where the shadows don't just fall, they dance. And once they invite you to join, there's no checking out early. So, dim the lights, grab something warm to drink, and let's dive into the bone-chilling tale of the shadows that dance in the Pinewood Library. Picture this: a quaint little town called Pine Ridge, Vermont. Think classic New England charm with white-steepled churches, maple trees blazing red in autumn, and winding roads flanked by dense pine forests that seem to go on forever. Nestled right in the heart of those woods, down a gravel path that's more overgrown than maintained, stands the Pinewood Library. Built in the late 1800s, it's a stunning Victorian Gothic masterpiece. Towering mahogany bookshelves that reach 2 stories high, intricate stained glass windows depicting scenes from classic literature, a massive domed reading room with a circle of velvet armchairs around a central fireplace, and walls lined with thousands of leather-bound volumes. The whole place smells like pine resin seeping in from the surrounding trees, mixed with that unmistakable scent of aged paper and ink. For decades, it was the pride of Pine Ridge, a haven for book lovers, scholars, and locals hosting poetry readings under the dome. But on Halloween night, the 31st of October 1977, everything changed. The head librarian, Evelyn Hart, a elegant woman in her 50s, known for her sharp mind and passion for forbidden folklore, hosted a special midnight poetry event. 47 patrons showed up, townsfolk, visiting academics, even some out-of-towners drawn by rumors of rare occult volumes in the collection. As the clock struck midnight, a sudden fog rolled in from the pines, thicker than anyone had ever seen. Witnesses from outside swore they saw the library's lights flicker, then glow an unnatural blue. When the fog lifted hours later, the doors were unlocked, the fire still crackling, but Evelyn Hart and all 47 patrons were gone. Vanished, no signs of struggle, no footprints in the damp earth outside. The card catalog was pulled open to a single drawer labeled Dance, and several books on the reading tables had pages that appeared wet, dark stains, later tested as ink mixed with something organic. No bodies ever found. The town padlocked the doors, boarded the windows, and declared it off-limits for renovations that never happened. But locals know the truth. Every Halloween, the lights inside glow faintly through the cracks, and if you listen close from the tree line, you can hear pages turning and faint music like a waltz played on an old phonograph. Now, jump ahead to the 31st of October 2024, exactly 47 years later. Our protagonist is Leora Vale, a 6-year-old rare book appraiser from Boston. Leora's got that perfect mix of curiosity and expertise. She travels the country valuing private collections, spotting forgeries, and occasionally uncovering lost treasures. She'd heard whispers about Pinewood Library through antiquarian circles, rumors of extremely rare, possibly forbidden volumes locked away in its vaults, books on esoteric subjects that could fetch a fortune at auction. Leora saw it as a career jackpot, catalog them discreetly, prove their authenticity, and make a name for herself. She put together a small team. Theo, a 8-year-old photographer who documents her finds with stunning shots, Soren, a 2-year-old archivist obsessed with historical manuscripts, and Mira, a 4-year-old sound engineer tagging along to record ambient audio for a potential documentary tie-in. They arrived at dusk on Halloween, the pines creaking in a chilly wind, leaves swirling like confetti from hell. The library loomed dark and silent, vines creeping over the Gothic arches. They picked the rusted padlock easy after decades of neglect and pushed open the heavy oak doors. The air inside hit them like a wave, thick with pine scent and the musty richness of untouched books. But what froze them in place was how pristine everything looked. Not a speck of dust on the mahogany shelves. The grand reading room had 47 antique chairs arranged in a perfect circle around the fireplace, each with an open book on the seat and a quill pen scratching faint words across blank pages, as if waiting for the poetry reading to resume. Leora brushed it off as incredible preservation, maybe the sealed environment. Theo set up lights and his camera. Soren geeked out over the shelves. Mira dropped her recorder on a table to capture the eerie silence. Then, at exactly 11:47 p.m., the massive grandfather clock in the corner, frozen at midnight for 47 years, struck 13 times, a deep, resonant chime that vibrated through the floor. Suddenly, shadows detached from the walls and bookshelves. Not cast by any light source, these were independent, elongated silhouettes that began to waltz across the Persian rugs, twirling in pairs like Victorian dancers. Theo's camera feed glitched wildly, then stabilized to show the room filled with figures. Inky black silhouettes with no bodies attached, faces forming from swirling script, spinning gracefully to unheard music. By 11:52 p.m., Mira's recorder picked up clear audio. A woman's voice, refined and echoing, reciting poetry. It was Evelyn Hart. Recordings from old library events matched perfectly. Step into the margin, become the footnote. Join the eternal verse. Books on the shelves started flipping pages on their own, the air sliced by the sharp whoosh of paper. At 11:55 p.m., Soren, unable to resist, touched a thick, leather-bound tome titled something illegible in faded gold. His fingers sank into the cover like it was soft clay. Black ink crawled up his hand, tracing veins under his skin. He gasped, then began reciting in a monotone. I am the index. Cross-reference me. His skin paled, turning translucent like parchment, eyes filling with tiny printed footnotes. The shadows swirled around him, pulling him backward into the open book. The spine snapped shut with a final thud, the title now reading Archivist in fresh ink. Panic set in. Leora and Theo bolted for the mezzanine balcony overlooking the reading room, with Mira close behind. But the grand staircase transformed, steps flattening into giant pages that ripped and tore under their feet, words bleeding upward. Mira slipped, her recorder smashing. From the fragments came her own voice distorted. Record this ending. Shadows yanked her down, folding her into a speaker-shaped book on the floor. By November 1, 12:13 a.m., just after midnight, Leora and Theo barricaded in an upper archive room. There, in a locked drawer that popped open on its own, they found Evelyn Hart's personal journal. Leather cover warm to the touch, pages breathing faintly. Leora read aloud, voice trembling, "The library isn't built of stone and wood. It's a living story." In 1730, during colonial witch hunts, 47 accused women sought refuge here on unconsecrated ground. The townsfolk bound them into the foundation, pages soaked in pine sap for preservation and their blood for ink. The shadows are their essence, dancing eternally. Every 47 years on All Hallows' Eve, the story needs new chapters, a new librarian to author the tale. I tried to close the book in 1977. Instead, it wrote me in. At 12:17 a.m., Theo's shadow peeled away from his body. It danced independently, growing longer, pulling at him like taffy. His arms dissolved into inky tendrils, legs folding like margins. He whispered, almost peacefully, "The rhythm. It's perfect." His remaining form crumpled into a new volume on the shelf, spine labeled Photographer, pages flashing phantom images like old negatives. By 12:34 a.m., Leora was alone. The shadows formed a perfect circle below, chanting in tiny footnote script that crawled across the floor and up the walls. From a book on the table shaped like a speaker, Mira's voice echoed, "Your story needs a proper ending." A quill pen on the desk lifted, hovering, then pressed against Leora's skin, writing directly on her arm. Chapter 48, The Appraiser. At 12:47 a.m., the clock struck 47 times, each chime a layered whisper. Leora felt her body lighten, her feet leaving the ground as shadows lifted her into a waltz. She spun downward, merging with them, her form dissolving into swirling pages that bound themselves into the card catalog with a satisfied sigh. Come 2025, Pine Ridge is quieter. Folks avoid the woods, saying the pines whisper verses at night. But every Halloween, the library glows softly. On the 31st of October 2025, at 11:47 p.m., a new team of appraisers arrives. Flashlights cutting the dark, excited about those rumored rare books. The doors creak open invitingly. The card catalog drawer slides out on its own, and from the shadows, Leora's voice, elegant, welcoming, calls. Check out your story. We have all night. Let's dive deeper, because the real terror lives in those lingering details that keep you up at night. Leora Vale wasn't just chasing books for money. Years ago, her fiancé, a fellow appraiser, died mysteriously after handling a cursed volume from a private collection. His last journal entry mirrored Evelyn's, marginal notes about shadows inviting him to dance. That night in Pinewood, the shadows didn't just waltz. They replayed her marginalia from old books, annotations in her handwriting appearing on walls, reminding her of every regret. Locals had steered clear for generations. They claimed books sometimes flew out broken windows at night, pages scattering like birds, compasses failed near the pines, needles spinning toward the library. Hikers reported hearing waltzes on windless evenings. The quills weren't ordinary. They bled pine sap mixed with dark fluid, writing prophecies that came true. Soren's parchment skin didn't change instantly. Footnotes of his life story printed across it, indexing every secret and scream. Theo's book didn't just close, it emitted faint flashbulb pops, like capturing final moments. Previous intruders met similar fates. In the 1,980 seconds, urban explorers left with ink stains that formed words days later. In the 2000s, a paranormal team recorded EVPs of poetry that drove one member to obsessively write until his fingers bled. The journal breathed because it was alive, pages turning to follow your eyes. For those new appraisers in 2025, they don't just hear Leora's voice, they feel her quill tracing words on their skin through their clothes, a gentle but insistent pen stroke on their pulse. Going back to the root, obscure Vermont records confirm 1,730 witch trials where 47 women vanished near Pine Ridge. Official story fled to Canada, but folklore says they were bound in stories to silence them. Their essence infused into the library's founding collection with pine sap preservative and ritual ink. The shadows that dance in Pinewood Library wait eternally, the story forever unfolding. If you're ever in a quiet library past closing and notice shadows moving without light or pages turning on their own to unheard music, drop the book. Back away. Get out before the invitation comes. Because some libraries aren't for reading, they're for writing you in, permanently. This one's strange, dark, and mysterious through and through, the kind that makes quiet please signs feel like a warning. Stay safe out there, folks, and remember, never stay past closing. The ghostly guests of the Ravenwood Inn. All right, folks, if you're here for those strange, dark, and mysterious stories told in a way that feels like we're huddled around a fire sharing whispers, then strap in. This one's going to make you double-check your hotel door locks and maybe even sleep with the lights on. We're talking about an isolated old inn where the guests don't just check in. They never check out. This tale comes from the misty, rugged mountains of West Virginia, where the fog clings to the ridges like a shroud, and the nights are so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. It's the kind of place where cell service dies and the roads vanish into the haze. So, settle in, keep something sturdy nearby, and let's uncover the terrifying story of the ghostly guests of the Ravenwood Inn. Deep in the Appalachian folds lies a forgotten speck called Raven Hollow, West Virginia. A tiny community of coal miners' descendants, moonshiners' kin, and folks who keep to themselves. Perched high on a lonely ridge, accessible only by a winding dirt road that turns treacherous after rain, stands the Ravenwood Inn. This sprawling Victorian beauty was built in the 1,890 seconds. 3 stories of dark wood and gingerbread trim, 47 guest rooms, a grand lobby with a massive stone fireplace, and a wraparound porch that creaks under the slightest breeze. Back in its heyday, it was a retreat for wealthy city folk, escaping the summer heat, hunting parties, honeymooners, and mysterious travelers who paid in cash and asked few questions. But on a stormy weekend in 1977, during a brutal nor'easter that dumped feet of snow and knocked out power for days, the inn became a tomb. The innkeeper, Silas Crow, a stern, silver-haired man in his 60 seconds who'd run the place for decades, and all 47 guests who were snowed in that weekend simply disappeared. No distress calls, no signs of foul play. Searchers found the front doors unlocked, fires still smoldering in the hearths, meals half-eaten on tables. But the guest register opened to a fresh page with Room 13 scrawled in wet ink, as if someone had just signed in. No footprints in the snow leading away, no bodies ever recovered. The state investigated, ruled it an unsolved mass disappearance, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning causing mass delusion and wandering into the storm, but locals whispered darker things. They condemned the building, chained the gates, and left it to rot. Yet every full moon, that single porch light flickers on, glowing through the fog like a lure. Fast forward to the 27th of September 2024, a crisp harvest moon night. Enter Alara Finch, a 30-year-old travel vlogger with a thriving channel dedicated to haunted stays and abandoned explorations. Alara's got that adventurous spark, fearless on camera, always chasing the next viral thrill. She'd stumbled across a glitchy old website for Ravenwood Inn that shouldn't exist anymore, one of those archived relics from the early internet. Out of nowhere, a Book Now button popped up, and after clicking it, half joking, she got a confirmation email. Room 13 reserved. Key will be waiting. She rallied her crew. Jude, her 3 2-year-old cameraman and longtime collaborator. Nova, a 2 8-year-old paranormal tech whiz loaded with EMF readers, spirit boxes, and thermal camps. And Rafe, a burly 3 5-year-old driver who'd navigated backroads for them before. Their van crested the ridge at dusk, fog rolling in thick as soup, swallowing the headlights. No cell bars, GPS glitching out. The inn materialized like a ghost itself, windows dark except for that one glowing porch light. And there, in the front door, a single brass key dangling from the lock as promised. They pushed inside, and the lobby was waiting. Gas lamps flickered to life on their own, casting warm shadows over velvet settees and a massive oak front desk. On the wall behind, 47 antique keys hanging neatly on brass hooks, tags swaying gently. The brass service bell on the desk dinged softly by itself like a polite greeting. The air smelled of old wood smoke and faint lavender. "This is gold," Alara whispered, grinning for the camera. Jude started rolling footage, Nova set up gear, Rafe hung back, uneasy. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the oversized guest register on the desk flipped open with a thud. Pages rustled, and fresh ink appeared. Alara Finch, room 13. Then below, the names of Jude, Nova, and Rafe, assigning them rooms too. Jude's camera feed distorted static, then clearing to show the lobby filled with translucent figures in Victorian attire. Men in tailcoats, women in bustled gowns, faces pale and waxy, melting at the edges like candles, milling about as if arriving for a weekend stay. By 11:52 p.m., Nova's EMF reader went haywire, spiking off the charts. The key for room 13 lifted off its hook, floating across the lobby into Alara's outstretched hand, ice cold, like it'd been buried in frost. The old manual elevator cage at the end of the hall creaked open invitingly, brass gates gleaming. At 11:55 p.m., Rafe, trying to play it cool, tapped the service bell for a joke. "Anyone home?" Big mistake. His fingers stuck fast, fusing to the brass as it spread up his arms like liquid metal. He yanked in panic, but the bell rang out deep and resonant, 47 overlapping voices echoing, "Welcome to your eternal stay." His body softened, melting downward into the desk itself, reforming as the bell, now larger, with faint features of his face etched in the metal. Alara, Jude, and Nova bolted upstairs, hearts pounding. But the corridor was wrong, endlessly long, doors on both sides all numbered 13, 13, 13. They burst into the nearest room 13, a lavish suite with a massive 4-poster bed, heavy drapes, and a huge gilded mirror over the vanity. The mirror didn't reflect them. It showed 47 ghostly guests waltzing slowly in the room behind them. At the window stood Silas Crow, translucent as mist, skin swirling like fog, eyes hollow black keyholes. He turned, smiling thinly. "Your stay is permanent. No early checkout." By 12:17 a.m., Jude stared too long into the mirror. His reflection grinned independently, stepping out, camera lens for eyes, filming him in reverse. Jude's real body slumped, lifeless, empty husk, while the reflection took his place, turning the lens on Alara. Nova's gear overloaded next, her EMF device melting, wires snaking up her arms, burrowing into skin. Static crackled from her mouth. Signal. Forever. Her body flickered like bad reception, skin turning to television snow, broadcasting faint screams on an endless loop. At 12:34 a.m., Alara was alone. The register, somehow now in the room, wrote itself again. Guest 48, Alara Finch, eternal stay. The mirror guest extended hands, pulling her reflection toward the glass. Her phone, somehow getting a phantom signal, live-streamed from inside the mirror. Alara smiling vacantly, saying to her viewers, "Best day ever, 5 stars." By 12:47 a.m., the porch light outside dimmed to nothing. Alara's body folded unnaturally, dissolving into the open register pages, ink swirling to complete her entry. Room 13's door locked from the outside with a final click. In 2025, Raven Hollow has faded further, homes boarded up, roads overgrown. But every harvest full moon, the inn's porch light glows invitingly. On the 27th of September 2025, at 11:47 p.m., a new crew of vloggers crest the ridge, drawn by that same impossible book now ad. The key waits in the door, the register flips open, and from the shadows behind the desk, Alara's voice, warm, hospitable, calls out, "Room 13 is ready for you. Welcome home." Now, let's sink deeper into the nightmare, because the chills come from those details that burrow under your skin. Alara wasn't chasing ghosts randomly. She'd stayed in exactly 47 haunted hotels before this, documenting each for her channel, almost like she was building towards something. That floating key didn't just chill her palm, it whispered her childhood home address, a place she'd never shared online. Locals had long shunned the ridge, cars mysteriously stalling at the gate, radios picking up old-timey waltzes. Hikers found luggage washed up in ravines, tags from 1,977 guests. The bell's ring wasn't mere sound, it signed new names in the ledger simultaneously. Jude's reflection cameraman didn't just film, it exposed raw footage of his deepest fears flashing on its lens eyes. Nova's static form broadcast not random noise, but looped clips of her team's final moments. To trace the curse back, obscure county records hint at the inn's founding in 1890 on land once used for a miner's quarantine during a plague. 47 workers checked in and never left, their essence bound to the building, with rituals involving brass keys and blood ink ledgers. Previous trespassers met grim ends, 1,980 seconds. Teens found days later wandering highways, babbling about eternal room service. 2,000 ghost hunters left cameras running. Footage showed them joining the waltz. Never seen again. The ledger doesn't lie on paper, it pulses, pages bleeding fresh reservations. For those new vloggers, they won't just hear Alara, they'll find an old coin in their pocket, her tip for excellent service. The Ravenwood Inn waits atop its ridge. Vacancy sign eternally off, but always room for more. If you're driving those mountain roads under a full moon and spot a glowing porch light through the fog, or get a booking confirmation from nowhere, turn around. Floor it. Because some inns don't host guests, they collect them. This story's strange, dark, and mysterious in the most inescapable way. The kind that makes "do not disturb" signs feel like a plea. Stay vigilant out there, folks. And whatever you do, never take room 13. The Curse of the Old Mill by Hollow Creek. Alright folks, if you're a fan of those strange, dark, and mysterious stories told like we're swapping tales in a dimly lit room, then this one's gonna stick with you. Especially if you've ever driven past an old mill on a back road and caught a whiff of something baking that shouldn't be there. This tale comes from the rolling hills and hollows of rural Kentucky, where the creeks run slow and the nights are thick with cicadas and secrets. It's about an ancient grist mill, where the wheel doesn't just turn grain, it turns people. So, grab a blanket, make sure the windows are shut, and let's get into the grinding horror of The Curse of the Old Mill by Hollow Creek. Deep in the backcountry of Kentucky lies a forgotten little crossroads called Hollowford, barely a dot on the map, with a gas station that's half convenience store, half bait shop, and folks who still wave at strangers from their porches. Running lazily through it is Hollow Creek, a shallow stream that's more mud than water most of the year. Squatting on its banks like a brooding giant is Grimsby Mill, a massive 150-year-old stone and timber beast built back when steam was new and water power ruled. This thing is huge. A towering wooden water wheel over 30 feet across, thick stone walls choked with kudzu and vines, and inside a monstrous 10-foot grindstone carved from granite, its grooves deep and worn from generations of crushing wheat into flour. For over a century, it fed the county, farmers hauling sacks of grain at dawn, leaving with fresh flour that made the best biscuits in the state. But in 1977, during a routine midnight grind to beat the summer heat, the miller, Jonah Hale, a quiet, hardworking man in his 52nds who'd inherited the job from his father, and all 47 workers on shift that night vanished without a trace. Search parties found the wheel still spinning slowly, even though the creek race was bone dry after a drought. Fresh flour piled high, pure white, finer than any machine could make, and no water powering anything. No screams heard, no blood, no bodies, just gone. The county dynamited the dam to flood the race and stop the wheel forever, condemned the mill, and warned everyone to stay away. But locals know, every full moon, that wheel creaks back to life, turning on nothing but hunger, and the air fills with the smell of baking bread. Now, fast forward to the 15th of July, 2024, a sticky full moon night in the heart of summer. Our main character is Saffron Reed, a 28-year-old food historian and content creator with a popular series called Forgotten Recipes, where she recreates old pioneer dishes and explores historic kitchens. Saffron's passionate, a bit obsessive, always chasing authentic tastes from the past. One morning, she found a handwritten note slipped under her apartment door in Louisville, yellowed paper, old-fashioned script saying, "Come taste the old harvest at Grimsby Mill." The recipe awaits. No signature, just a faint smell of yeast. Intrigued and seeing viral potential, she assembled a team. Cal, her 30-year-old cameraman and tech guy, Ren, a 26-year-old folklorist who'd studied Appalachian legends, and Boone, a 5-year-old local millwright from Holliford who'd restored old wheels and reluctantly agreed to guide them after many warnings. They arrived at dusk, fireflies blinking in the humid air, the creek barely trickling. The mill loomed dark and overgrown, but the heavy wooden door stood ajar, and inside, oil lanterns flickered to life as they entered. The air was thick sweet with rising dough and a metallic tang like iron. Burlap sacks lined the walls, plump and waiting. The massive grindstone in the center hummed faintly, dust motes dancing in the lantern light. Saffron laughed it off. "Okay, this is atmospheric gold. Probably some locals pranking for views." Cal set up cameras. Ren flipped through her notebook. Boone eyed the wheel warily. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the water wheel outside groaned to life, creaking slowly, turning with no water flow. Flour dust exploded into the air, swirling into shapes, 47 ghostly faces with open mouths pleading silently. Cal's camera glitched hard feed, showing the mill filled with translucent workers in overalls, limbs twisted like broken stalks, eyes like kernels of grain, feeding invisible sacks into the hopper. By 11:52 p.m., Boone, practical guy, trying to prove it was wind, touched the grindstone to check for vibration. His hands sank in like soft clay. He yanked back, but fingers crumbled to white powder, bones grinding audibly into meal. Flour poured from his mouth as he gasped. "It's hungry." His body seized, cracking like dry earth, collapsing into a fresh pile of bone-white flour. At 11:55 p.m., Ren's journal pages bled dark ink, words appearing. Recip, 1 soul per moon. ADD, blood for rise. Burlap sacks on the floor split open, doughy hands reaching out, pulling at their legs. From the loft above appeared Jonah Hale, skin like weathered burlap, hair and beard matted wheat chaff, teeth jagged like millstone grooves. He rasped, "The mill needs leaven to rise." Saffron and Cal scrambled up the wooden stairs to the loft for safety with Ren close. But the stairs slicked, turning into grain chutes that slid them toward the stone. Ren tumbled first, barrel in the corner opening, sucking her in with fermented whispers. Her voice echoed later, twisted laughter bubbling like proofing dough. By July 16, 12:13 a.m. in the loft, they found Jonah Hale's crumbling logbook on a dusty shelf. Pages flaked as Saffron read, "The wheel isn't powered by water, it's hunger." Built in 1840 on a site where 47 starving settlers, driven mad by famine, fed rivals to the stones, blood watering the race, bones ground fine. The curse bound them. It demands fresh harvest every full moon. Every 47 years, it claims a new miller to tend it. I tried to burn it in 1977. It ground me instead. At 12:17 a.m., Cal started swelling, skin puffing like rising bread, yeast blooming visibly under his flesh in bubbling patches. He clawed at himself, folding unnaturally. Gotta need the batch. His body deflated into a bulging sack, labeled fresh in flour dust. By 12:34 a.m., Saffron was alone. The grindstone below roared faster, grooves glowing red hot. From a sealed barrel, Ren's voice gurgled, "Add salt," for flavor. Saffron felt her blood thicken, sweetening like syrup in her veins body preparing to bake. At 12:47 a.m., the wheel thundered. Against her will, Saffron walked to the hopper, climbing in. The stones closed, grinding with wet crunches. Flour poured out pure white under the moon. In the old brick oven nearby, 47 loaves rose suddenly, faces pressed against the crust, mouths open in silent screams. By 2025, Holliford has emptied, folks selling up, saying the creek smells like bread even when dry, fish floating with doughy gills. But every full moon, the wheel turns. On the 15th of July 2025, at 11:47 p.m., a new group of food historians pulls up, drawn by a mysterious note. The door stands open. The oven glows. And from the loft, Saffron's voice, warm, inviting, calls, "Come taste the harvest. It's to die for." Let's grind deeper into this nightmare, because the true horror is in the crumbs that linger. Saffron Reed wasn't just recreating recipes for fun. As a child, after her grandmother passed, she'd baked her ashes into a memorial loaf, a private ritual to keep her close. That night, the swirling flour dust didn't just form faces. It whispered her grandmother's old biscuit recipe, remembering every ingredient, including the forbidden one. Locals had avoided Hollow Creek for decades, claiming deer wandered in and came out as clean bones, or that fresh bread appeared on doorsteps, warm but tasting of iron. The stone's grooves didn't just crush, they hummed old lullabies in cracking tones. Cal's rising flesh proofed slowly, his screams muffled as dough sealed his mouth. Wren's barrel fermented her alive, her folktales bubbling out as garbled yeast burps. Historical digs that Wren had started before uncovered 1,840 settler journals hinting at cannibalism during a harsh winter. 47 disappeared, fed to the new mill to bless the in places harvest. Previous visitors fared no better. 1,980 seconds kids dared inside, found days later as flower piles. 2,000 urban explorers left GoPros running. Footage showed them kneading themselves into sacks. The logbook